Your kids can eat when they get home, my mom said, tossing them napkins, while my sister's daughters unwrapped $65 pasta and dessert boxes. Her husband laughed. Should have fed them first. I just whispered, copy that. When the waiter returned, I stood up and said, the drive to Mabella's took 40 minutes through Portland traffic, and my kids sang along to the radio the whole way. Emma, my 7-year-old, kept asking if they had chocolate cake. Lucas, who just turned 5, wanted spaghetti with meatballs bigger than his head. They'd been looking forward to this dinner for 2 weeks, ever since Mom called to announce she was taking the whole family out to celebrate her 60th birthday at the fanciest Italian restaurant in the city. Grandma's going to be so happy to see you guys, I told them as we pulled into the parking lot. The restaurant had valet service, which should have been my first clue about what kind of evening this would become. Inside, the hostess led us through a maze of white tablecloths and flickering candlelight. My mother sat at the head of a long table, already holding court with my sister Jennifer and her family. Jennifer's daughters, Madison and Haley, were 12 and 10, dressed in matching designer dresses that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Jennifer's husband, Derek, sat beside her, checking his phone with the bored expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Aunt Mabel Madison called out, waving enthusiastically. At least the kids were excited to see us. My mother looked up from her menu, and I watched her expression shift from pleased to something colder. Her eyes landed on Emma and Lucas still in their school clothes because I'd picked them up, straight from aftercare, to make it here on time. You made it, Mom said, her tone suggesting she'd hoped otherwise. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten. Traffic was terrible, I explained, helping Emma into her chair. Lucas climbed up next to her, his legs swinging happily beneath the table. Jennifer leaned over to kiss my cheek, her perfume so strong it made my eyes water. We've been here for 20 minutes already. Mom wanted to order appetizers, but we waited. That's sweet, thanks. I grabbed 2 menus from the center of the table and started looking at the kids' options. Everything was expensive, but Mom had insisted this was her treat. Splurge a little, Mabel, she'd said on the phone. You work so hard. Let me spoil my grandchildren. The waiter appeared a young guy named Trevor, according to his name tag. He had that practiced smile all good servers develop, the one that says he's seen every kind of family drama unfold over bread baskets and wine lists. Can I start you folks off with some drinks? Trevor asked. Mom ordered a glass of Chianti. Derek wanted a bourbon. Jennifer asked for sparkling water with extra lemon. I ordered regular water for myself and apple juice for the kids. Actually, Mom interrupted before Trevor could write it down. Let's just do water for everyone under 12. Juice has too much sugar. I felt my jaw tighten, but nodded. Emma's face fell slightly. She loved apple juice. Trevor took our drink orders and promised to return in a few minutes. Mom launched into a story about her recent trip to Napa Valley with her book club friends, a group of women who seemed to spend most of their retirement traveling to wine regions and complaining about their adult children. Jennifer hung on every word, laughing at all the right moments. And then Sandra tried to pronounce Cabernet Sauvignon, and the sommelier actually corrected her in front of everyone, Mom said, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. It was mortifying. Poor Sandra. Poor Sandra, Jennifer echoed, though she was still laughing. Madison and Haley were showing Emma their new phones, identical rose gold iPhones that Jennifer had given them for getting good grades. Emma looked at them with a kind of longing only a 7-year-old can muster for a piece of technology. Maybe when you're older, I whispered to her. Trevor returned with our drinks and pulled out his notepad. Are we ready to order, or do you need a few more minutes? We're ready, Mom announced. She ordered a seafood linguine with lobster, the most expensive entree on the menu, at $85. Jennifer got the truffle risotto. Derek ordered a 16-ounce ribeye. Madison and Haley each asked for the butternut squash ravioli with brown butter sauce, which came in at $38 per plate. Then it was my turn. I looked down at Emma and Lucas. Can I get the spaghetti with meatballs? Lucas asked, his voice small and hopeful. And I want the chicken parmesan, Emma added. Please. I checked the prices quickly. $24 for the spaghetti. $28 for the chicken parmesan plus my own meal. Even choosing the cheapest option for myself, we were looking at well over $100 for the 3 of us. But Mom had said it was her treat, and this was supposed to be a celebration. The spaghetti and meatballs for him, I told Trevor. Chicken parmesan for her, and I'll have the margarita pizza. Before Trevor could finish writing, my mother's hand shot up. Actually, hold on. Everyone at the table went quiet. Trevor's pen hovered over his notepad. That's too much food, Mom said, looking directly at me. Kids their age don't need full meals at a place like this. They'll waste half of it. Heat crept up my neck. They're growing kids, Mom. They're hungry. Your kids can eat when they get home, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut the tension at the table. She grabbed 2 cloth napkins from the empty seats beside her and tossed them down in front of Emma and Lucas. Here, they can have bread from the basket when it comes out. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. You're joking. I'm not paying for food that'll end up in a doggy bag, Mom continued. It's wasteful. Besides, children should learn to wait for proper meal times instead of constantly snacking. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but said nothing. Derek, however, let out a low chuckle that made my blood boil. Should have fed them first, he said, smirking at his phone screen. That's what we do when we know we're going somewhere nice. McDonald's stops are cheap insurance. Madison and Haley exchanged glances, but stayed silent. Emma's lower lip started to tremble. Lucas looked at me with confused eyes, trying to understand why his grandmother had just denied him dinner. The waiter stood frozen, clearly unsure whether to flee or intervene. Other diners were starting to glance our way. I took a slow breath, my hands gripping the edge of the table. The rage building inside me was volcanic, but I forced myself to speak calmly. Copy that, I whispered. Mom smiled, apparently satisfied that I'd accepted her decree. She turned back to Trevor. So that's the seafood linguine for me, the risotto for Jennifer, the ribeye for Derek, and the ravioli for both girls. That's all. Trevor looked at me, sympathy written all over his face. And for you, ma'am? Nothing for us, I said quietly. Thank you. He nodded and disappeared toward the kitchen, probably grateful to escape the awkwardness. The table fell into strange conversation. Mom asked Jennifer about Madison's soccer tournament. Derek bragged about his recent promotion. The girls talked about their upcoming vacation to Disney World, their 3rd trip in 2 years. Meanwhile, Emma and Lucas sat in silence, their napkins spread across their laps like tiny tablecloths. A server brought out the bread basket, and Mom made a show of placing 2 small pieces on my kids' plates. There you go, she said sweetly, as if she'd done them a tremendous favor. Enjoy. Lucas nibbled at his bread. Emma didn't touch hers. She was old enough to understand the insult, young enough that the hurt showed plainly on her face. I watched my sister's daughters receive their ravioli 15 minutes later. The plates were enormous, each one holding at least 6 plump pasta squares, swimming in brown butter and topped with crispy sage. The portions could have easily fed 2 children. Madison and Haley dug in enthusiastically while Emma and Lucas watched. This is so good, Madison said. Aunt Mabel, you should try it. I'm not hungry, I lied. Derek's steak arrived next bloody in the center, just the way he'd requested. Jennifer's risotto came in a bowl the size of a small mixing basin. Mom's seafood pasta looked like something from a culinary magazine, artfully arranged with whole prawns and chunks of lobster tail. They all ate. My children watched. You're awfully quiet, Mabel, Mom said, between bites of her $85 lobster. Everything all right? Fine, I managed. Jennifer tried to change the subject. So Emma, how's 2nd grade going? Do you still like Mrs. Patterson? Emma mumbled something noncommittal. Lucas had rested his head against my arm, his energy flagging. Derek flagged down Trevor and ordered another bourbon. The table filled with the sounds of satisfied eating forks scraping against porcelain glasses clinking. My stomach growled quietly. I'd skipped lunch to finish a project at work, counting on this dinner. Mom finished her pasta and leaned back with a contented sigh. Delicious. Absolutely worth every penny. The ravioli was amazing, Madison chimed in. Can we get dessert, Mom? Of course, sweetheart, Jennifer said. It's Grandma's birthday celebration. Trevor returned to clear the plates, his eyes carefully avoiding mine. Mom ordered tiramisu. Jennifer wanted the panna cotta. Derek said he'd share whatever the girls got. Madison and Haley both chose the chocolate lava cake with vanilla gelato. Anything for you, Trevor asked me softly. I shook my head. Lucas perked up slightly at the mention of chocolate cake. Emma's eyes followed Trevor as he walked away, and I knew she was remembering her question from the car ride. The hope she'd carried into this restaurant had been thoroughly extinguished. The desserts arrived in elaborate presentations. The lava cakes came with sparklers shooting tiny fireworks into the air. Madison and Haley squealed with delight. A server brought out a separate plate with a single candle for Mom, and the staff gathered to sing happy birthday, while other diners applauded politely. Mom beamed, basking in the attention. She blew out her candle and cut into her tiramisu. The girls devoured their lava cakes, leaving smears of chocolate and melted gelato on their plates. Derek helped himself to Jennifer's panna cotta when she declared herself too full to finish. Who wants to take dessert home? Mom asked the girls. You've barely touched those. It was true. Despite their enthusiasm, Madison and Haley had each eaten maybe half of their massive desserts. The remainder sat on their plates. Perfectly good cake going to waste. "Can we get boxes?" Jennifer asked. Trevor appeared as if summoned. "Of course. Let me grab those for you." He returned moments later with 2 pristine white boxes tied with gold ribbon. Mabella's was printed in elegant script across the top. Each box probably cost more to produce than the bread my children had been allotted. Madison and Haley carefully transferred their leftover cakes into the boxes, treating them like precious cargo. Emma watched the whole process, her small hands folded in her lap. "You girls can have these for dessert tomorrow night," Jennifer told her daughters. What a treat. The irony wasn't lost on me. My children sat hungry while their cousins packaged up food they were too full to finish. Food that cost $65 combined. Food that would probably sit in Jennifer's refrigerator for 3 days before being thrown away. That's when the final thread of my patience snapped. I'd spent the last hour calculating the cost of the meals my mother had so readily purchased for everyone except my children. Calculating the number of times I'd swallowed my pride to keep the peace. Calculating how many times I'd let my mother treat my kids like afterthoughts while showering Jennifer's daughters with attention and resources. My mind drifted back to last Christmas when Madison and Haley had each received American Girl dolls with full accessory sets while Emma got a puzzle from the clearance rack at Walmart. Lucas had opened a package of socks, actual socks. When I gently mentioned the disparity to Mom later, she'd shrugged and said something about budgets being tight. Yet somehow she'd found room in that tight budget for $300 dolls. Or the time Emma made the honor roll at her school, and Mom barely acknowledged it. But when Madison got Student of the Month at her private academy, Mom threw her a celebration dinner and posted about it on Facebook for a week straight. The comments from her friends were effusive, praising Jennifer for raising such an accomplished daughter. Nobody mentioned that Emma existed. Jennifer had always been the golden child even before she'd married Derek and his 6-figure salary. She was the one who'd gone to a good college, who'd pledged the right sorority, who'd landed a corporate job with benefits and a 401k. I'd gone to community college while working full-time, scraped together an associate's degree, and ended up in medical billing at a small clinic. Respectable work, but not impressive enough to brag about at Mom's book club meetings. When Jennifer got pregnant with Madison, Mom had thrown her an elaborate baby shower at a country club. 75 people attended. The gift table looked like a boutique had exploded. When I got pregnant with Emma 3 years later, Mom hosted a small gathering at her house with sandwiches from the supermarket deli. 20 people came mostly out of obligation. The pattern had been there all along. I'd just gotten so used to being the lesser daughter that I'd started accepting it as normal. Started believing that maybe Jennifer did deserve more attention because she'd made better choices, climbed higher, married smarter. Started thinking that my kids should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection came their way from a grandmother who clearly preferred their cousins. But watching Emma's face as those dessert boxes were packed up, seeing Lucas try so hard to be good and quiet and invisible, something inside me finally broke. These were children, my children. They hadn't chosen which mother to be born to, hadn't selected their economic circumstances, or their zip code, or their school district. They were just kids who'd wanted to eat dinner with their family and had been publicly rejected for no reason, except that their existence reminded everyone at the table that I'd never quite measured up to Jennifer's standards. The rage wasn't hot anymore. It had gone cold and clear, the kind of anger that sharpens your thinking instead of clouding it. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Trevor approached with a check, presenting it to my mother in a leather folder. She pulled out her credit card without even looking at the total, ready to bask in the glory of her generosity. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the post-dinner chatter. Hold that thought. Everyone turned to look at me. Trevor froze mid-reach. I stood up my chair, scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the suddenly quiet space around our table. "I need to speak with you privately." I told Trevor about the check. "Of course," he said, confusion flickering across his face. I followed him a few steps away from the table, close enough to the server station that we had some privacy, but still within view of my family. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. "I need you to split this check," I said quietly. "Everything my mother ordered, my sister and her family ordered, that stays on one bill." "Got it." Trevor nodded slowly, already pulling out his notepad. "Good. Now I need you to start a completely separate check. Put every single thing my children were denied on it. 1 spaghetti and meatballs, 1 chicken parmesan, the margarita pizza I ordered for myself, and add 2 of those chocolate lava cakes, the same ones my nieces got." "Okay," Trevor said, writing quickly. "I want all of it to go," I continued. "Full orders. Box everything. And Trevor, I'm paying for that second check. Just mine, not hers." Understanding dawned in his eyes. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You got it." "One more thing," I added. When you bring those boxes out, I want them to look exactly like the ones you gave my nieces, the fancy white ones with the gold ribbon. The works. Absolutely, he said. Give me about 15 minutes. Perfect. I returned to the table. Mom was watching me with narrowed eyes. What was that about, she asked. Just clarifying something, I said, settling back into my chair and putting my arm around Emma. The service here is excellent, Mom announced to the table, signing her credit card receipt with a flourish. I'll definitely come back. Jennifer and Derek murmured their agreement. The girls were distracted by their phones again, their dessert boxes sitting between them like trophies. We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Then Trevor emerged from the kitchen, carrying a large bag. He approached our table with that same professional smile. Ma'am, he said, addressing me directly, your order is ready. He set the bag down on the table in front of me. Inside were 5 pristine white boxes, identical to the ones Madison and Haley had received, each tied with gold ribbon. The smell of fresh pasta and chocolate wafted up from the bag. Mom's face went pale. What is that? Dinner, I said simply. I reached into my purse and pulled out my wallet, extracting my debit card. For my children, I added, the meal they should have had an hour ago. You ordered food? Jennifer's voice climbed an octave. When? Just now. Everything we would have ordered originally plus dessert. I handed my card to Trevor. Thank you for accommodating me. My pleasure, he said, and he meant it. Mom's reaction was immediate and explosive. Her face flushed crimson, and she gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. Mabel Morrison, what do you think you're doing? Using my middle name, the ultimate maternal power move, like I was 12 years old again, instead of a 32-year-old mother of 2. Feeding my children, I said calmly. Something I assumed would happen when you invited us to a family dinner. Jennifer interjected her voice, taking on that syrupy tone she used when trying to diffuse situations. Mabel, honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Mom was just worried about waste. Was she worried about waste when your girls ordered $38 pasta they couldn't finish? I gestured to the boxes sitting between Madison and Haley. Because that looks like waste to me. Expensive, unnecessary waste. Derek's smirk had vanished. He shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable now that the spotlight had turned on his family. Hey, now let's not make this about the girls. You're right. Let's not, I agreed. Let's make it about the adults who decided some children deserve dinner and some deserve napkins. Let's talk about that choice. Madison's eyes were brimming with tears. She wasn't a bad kid, just a kid who'd been caught in the middle of adult dysfunction. I'm sorry, Aunt Mabel, she said softly. I didn't know. Sweetheart, this isn't your fault, I told her gently. You didn't do anything wrong. Mom found her voice again. You're embarrassing yourself, and me. Everyone is staring. Let them stare, I said. Maybe they'll learn something about how not to treat their grandchildren. A woman at the next table caught my eye and gave me a small nod of approval. An older gentleman 2 tables over was watching with his arms crossed, his expression suggesting he'd witnessed this exact scenario play out in his own family once upon a time. I've given you everything, Mom hissed, leaning forward. I helped you with rent when Lucas was born. I bought Emma's school supplies last year. I've babysat countless times. And I'm grateful for all of that, I said. But those things don't give you the right to humiliate my children. Help that comes with strings attached isn't really help, Mom. It's control. Trevor returned, bless him, with a receipt for me to sign. His timing couldn't have been better. I added a 40% tip knowing he'd earned every penny by helping me pull off this exit with grace. Not as excessive as watching 2 kids get cake while 2 others get napkins, I replied, my voice level. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Mabel, this is ridiculous. You're making a scene. Am I? Because I thought I was just feeding my children. You know, the thing a parent typically does at dinner time, the thing a grandmother typically encourages, actually. Trevor returned with my card and receipt. I signed it, adding a generous tip that I honestly couldn't afford but felt he'd earned. Ready to go, guys? I asked Emma and Lucas. They nodded vigorously. Lucas was already reaching for the bag of food. You're leaving! Mom's voice had gone shrill. But we haven't even done cake yet. You had tiramisu, I pointed out. And the kids have chocolate lava cake waiting for them in the car. The good kind with the sparklers and everything. I stood up and helped Emma with her jacket. Lucas clutched one of the boxes to his chest like it might disappear if he let go. Jennifer tried one last time. Mabel, don't be dramatic. Mom was just trying to teach them about portion control. Portion control, I repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I was sitting, it looked a lot like favoritism, wrapped in a thin excuse about waste. That's not fair, Mom protested. I treat all my grandchildren equally. Do you? I picked up the bag of food, its weight substantial and satisfying in my hand. Because Madison and Haley got $65 worth of pasta and dessert, Emma and Lucas got 2 pieces of bread and a lecture. If that's equal in your mind, we need to have a serious conversation about math. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Madison and Haley had gone silent. Their earlier excitement evaporated. Even they could sense they'd been part of something unfair. I paid for this dinner, Mom said, her face flushed. I decided who got what. You absolutely did, I agreed. And now I've paid for my dinner. I've decided who gets what, too. Turns out my kids get full meals. Funny how that works. I took Emma's hand and Lucas grabbed onto my other side. We started walking toward the exit. Mabel Mom's voice followed us through the restaurant. If you walk out that door, don't expect me to include you in the next family event. I paused and turned back to face her one last time. Every eye in the restaurant seemed to be on us now, but I didn't care anymore. Mom, if the next family event looks anything like this one, you're doing me a favor. We walked out. The valet brought my car around, probably sensing the urgency in our exit. I buckled the kids into their seats and placed the bag of food between them. Emma opened her box first. The chicken parmesan looked incredible golden and bubbling with melted cheese. Lucas's spaghetti and meatballs could have fed him for 2 days. Can we eat in the car? Emma asked, her voice small and hopeful. Normally I'd say no, I told her, starting the engine. But tonight's special. Dig in. They didn't need to be told twice. Within seconds, the car filled with the sounds of happy eating. I unwrapped my pizza at a red light and took a huge bite. It was delicious, worth every penny of the $112 I'd just put on my debit card. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. Then a text from Mom, then another from Jennifer. I ignored them all. Mom, Emma said from the back seat, her mouth full of chicken. This is really good. Yeah, I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. I'm glad, baby. Can we come here again? Just us? The question hit me harder than I expected. Just us. Without the judgment, without the comparisons, without the constant reminder that her cousins somehow deserved more, simply because their mother had married better or chosen a more lucrative career path. Maybe someday, I said, when we have money for a special occasion. This feels like a special occasion, Lucas chimed in, red sauce smeared across his chin. He was right. It did feel special. Not because of the food, though, that helped, but because I'd finally drawn a line. I'd finally said no to the pattern that had defined my relationship with my mother for years. The pattern of accepting, less expecting less, teaching my children to be grateful for scraps while others feasted. We drove home through the darkened streets of Portland, the city lights reflecting off the Willamette River. Emma and Lucas devoured their meals, occasionally exclaiming over how good everything tasted. By the time we pulled into our apartment complex, all that remained were the 2 chocolate lava cake boxes, pristine in their gold ribbons. Can we save these for tomorrow? Emma asked as we climbed the stairs to our second-floor unit. Sure, honey. They'll be a perfect after-school treat. Inside our small apartment, I helped them wash up and get ready for bed. Lucas fell asleep almost immediately, his belly finally full. Emma lingered in the doorway of her room, watching me clean up the empty food containers. Mom, she said softly, are you mad at Grandma? I paused, considering how to answer. I'm disappointed in the way she treated you tonight. She used to be nicer, Emma said, before Madison and Haley got bigger. The observation startled me with its accuracy. Emma was right. The favoritism had intensified as my nieces had gotten older, as Jennifer's life had gotten shinier, as the gap between our 2 families had widened from a crack to a chasm. People sometimes forget to be kind, I told her. Even people who should know better. Will we see her again? Probably. She's still your grandma, but things might be different now. Emma nodded, processing this. Different good or different bad? Different honest, I said, which is always better in the long run. She seemed satisfied with this answer and went to bed. I stayed up for another hour, finally checking the messages I'd ignored. Jennifer's texts were diplomatic, asking me to reconsider, suggesting we all talk it through. Derek had sent nothing, which didn't surprise me. Mom's messages started angry, moved to defensive, and ended with a curt, call me when you're ready to apologize. I wouldn't be calling. Instead, I opened my banking app and looked at my balance. The dinner had put a dent in it, no question. I'd have to skip my own lunch for the next week to make up the difference. But as I looked at the 2 sleeping children down the hall, their stomachs full and their dignity intact, I knew I'd make the same choice again. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and a dozen more texts. Jennifer had apparently spent the night trying to play peacemaker. Mom had cycled back to anger. Even Derek had weighed in, suggesting I was being emotionally manipulative and teaching the kids the wrong lesson about family. I blocked them all. Not permanently, just long enough to think clearly, long enough to decide what kind of relationship I wanted with my family moving forward and what kind I was willing to settle for. Emma and Lucas devoured their chocolate lava cakes after school that day. sitting at our small kitchen table with sparklers I'd bought from the grocery store stuck in the tops. Their faces lit up brighter than the sparklers ever could. "Best dessert ever," Lucas declared, chocolate smeared across his cheeks. "Better than Grandma's birthday?" I asked, teasing. "Way better," Emma said firmly, "because we actually got to eat it." 3 weeks passed before I heard from Mom again, not through texts or calls, but through a card that arrived in the mail. Inside was a $50 gift card to Target and a note written in her precise handwriting for the kids. "I'm sorry about dinner. Can we talk?" I held the card for a long time, trying to decide if $50 and a vague apology counted as accountability or just another attempt to smooth things over without actually changing anything. In the end, I called her. "Mabel," she answered on the first ring. "Thank you for calling." Silence stretched between us, uncomfortable and necessary. "I've been thinking about what happened," she finally said. "Jennifer says I was too harsh. Jennifer is right. But you have to understand I wasn't trying to hurt Emma and Lucas." "I think that's the problem," I said. You didn't think. You didn't think about how it would feel for them to watch their cousins eat while they went hungry. You didn't think about what message that sends." "They weren't starving," she protested weakly. "They were humiliated. There's a difference between teaching kids about portion sizes and excluding them entirely while their cousins get a feast." Another long pause. "You're right," she admitted quietly. "It wasn't fair. Jennifer's family has different expectations," she continued. "They're used to nicer things. I wanted them to have a good time." "At my kids' expense." "Yes," she said, and the admission seemed to cost her something. "At your kids' expense. I'm sorry, Mabel." The apology felt more real than the one in the card. Not perfect, but genuine. "Where do we go from here?" I asked. "I'd like to see Emma and Lucas," Mom said. "Take them out for ice cream. Just the 3 of us. No Jennifer, no comparisons. Just Grandma and grandkids." "They'd like that," I admitted. "But Mom, if this is going to work, things have to be different. Equal. Actually equal, not just equal in theory." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because this has been building for years. The different Christmas presents, the way you talk about their school versus Madison, and Haley's private academy, the constant comparisons about achievements and activities." "I hear you," she said, and this time I believed her. "I'll do better." We made plans for the following Saturday. Ice cream at the small shop near the waterfront, the one with outdoor seating where kids could watch the boats go by. No fancy restaurants, no opportunities for favoritism to creep in through price points and menu selections. When Saturday came, I drove Emma and Lucas to meet their grandmother. She was already there, sitting at a picnic table with 3 cups of ice cream melting in the afternoon sun, 2 kiddie sizes and 1 small adult portion. "I got chocolate for Lucas and strawberry for Emma," Mom said nervously as we approached. "I hope that's right." "That's perfect," Emma said, scrambling onto the bench. Lucas dove into his chocolate with enthusiasm while Mom and I sat in awkward silence. The kids chatted about school and friends and a science project Emma was working on. Mom listened, actually listened, asking follow-up questions and showing genuine interest. It wasn't a magical healing moment. Relationships don't work that way. But it was a start, a small step towards something healthier. Mom didn't mention Jennifer or her granddaughters once. She didn't compare Emma's public school experience to anything. She didn't judge Lucas's messy eating or suggest he slow down. She was just present, just a grandmother with her grandchildren sharing ice cream on a sunny afternoon. As we drove home later, Emma said, "That was nice. Grandma was different." Yeah, I agreed. She was. "Do you think she'll stay different?" It was the million-dollar question, the one I couldn't answer with certainty. People had patterns, habits that ran deep. My mother's tendency to favor Jennifer's family over mine had roots that went back decades, tangled up in her own disappointments and dreams. But people could also change, could learn from their mistakes if they wanted to badly enough. "I think she'll try," I told Emma honestly. And that's a good start. My phone buzzed later that evening. A text from Mom. "Thank you for today. Same time next week." I typed back a simple yes and set down the phone. Jennifer called the following day, wanting to know if we could all get together for Madison's upcoming birthday party. I hesitated, the memory of that restaurant still fresh in my mind. But Madison hadn't done anything wrong. Neither had Haley. They were kids caught up in adult dynamics they didn't create. "I'll come," I told Jennifer, "but I need you to hear something first." "Okay," she said cautiously. "Emma and Lucas are just as important as your daughters. If there's cake, they get cake. If there are party favors, they get favors. No more hierarchy. No more golden children and forgotten ones." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "Is that really how you felt all this time?" "Yes. I never meant—" She stopped herself. "You're right. I've been so focused on giving my girls everything that I didn't notice we were giving them everything at someone else's expense. I'm sorry." Thank you for saying that. Madison's birthday party 2 weeks later was held at a trampoline park, the kind where kids could bounce themselves into exhaustion while adults watched from plastic chairs and complained about the noise. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. Emma and Lucas jumped alongside their cousins, all 4 kids shrieking with laughter as they launched themselves into foam pits. Mom showed up with a stack of presents carefully divided into 4 equal piles, despite it being Madison's birthday. Jennifer didn't object. Derek made polite conversation about traffic and work. The cake was a sheet cake from Costco big enough that every kid got a corner piece with extra frosting. Nobody went home hungry. Nobody went home feeling less than. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We didn't suddenly become the perfect television family, all conflict resolved and lessons learned. But we were better, more aware, more careful with each other's feelings, and more conscious of the little ways favoritism could creep in. Sometimes I think about that night at Mabella's, about the moment I stood up and reclaimed my children's dignity with $112 I couldn't really afford. About the look on my mother's face when she realized I was done accepting scraps. Was it petty, maybe? Was it dramatic? Definitely. But it was also necessary. Because sometimes the only way to change a pattern is to break it completely. Sometimes you have to stand up in a fancy restaurant and order the meal your kids deserved in the first place, even if it means splitting the check and splitting from the family narrative that says some children matter more than others. The boxes from that night are long gone, recycled weeks ago, but the message remains. My children are worth full meals, not napkins. They're worth celebration, not an afterthought. They're worth fighting for, even when the fight is uncomfortable and expensive and leaves you eating frozen pizza for a week to balance your budget. They're worth it. They've always been worth it. And I'll stand up and say it as many times as I need to, in as many restaurants as necessary, until everyone at the table understands that truth as clearly as I do. And I'll stand up and say it as many times as I need to, in as many restaurants as necessary, until everyone at the table understands that truth as clearly as I do.